too, if we can. Sorry, there was something that came up. Okay. We enjoy the interaction with other people. The caring is natural, and we go in stages. We recognize first, but then we start loving and caring and trying to take care of them whenever we can. Now, loving others, typically is a one-to-one relationship, and it starts with an attraction to other people, and it ends up in longing that relationship and longing for intimacy and recreating that pleasurable union and be able to identify with that one person and find happiness through that person and forget yourself in the process of being in love. And this is the intimate love component of loving others. But there are plenty of other forms of love, feeling other people's feelings. That's empathy and sympathy. And we share joy, adventure, discovery, achievements, in company of others, and that's how we celebrate life. And caring for other people in need, can be a pleasurable experience as long as it's within our means, both material needs and emotional needs, and that we connect to people that way. And we are all willing to share pleasure and pain, and that makes our journey of life easier. And there is a lot of love involved in giving away things and sacrificing your time and money for causes. There is some love involved in giving. And even spreading message of love and caring is also a loving and caring act. Now, why do we do it? We are all naturally loving and caring and reach out to the world. As infants, we're always interested in interacting with the rest of the world. As mammals, we are used to sharing and caring for one another and live in huddles and communities and groups. And loving relationships are fulfilling our emotional needs. We have emotional needs of staying connected and being able to enjoy interconnected experiences, interpersonal experiences that are fulfilling, and we need that as nourishment for our growth and sustenance. Loving others can replace love that we have missed. That's another thing, that even though we didn't get love from our parents when we were growing up, sometimes when we're able to love others, we replace that. We can re-experience that love when we love our children or other people's children. Now, reciprocal love relationship is the one that creates bonds between people, and there is an exchange of loving interaction that creates memories and bonds that make us rich in our life. And when we are in love, or when we have love in our life, it combats loneliness and we're not alone. Therefore, even if it is a long distance relationship, as long as we have somebody to think about, we're less likely to suffer loneliness and depression. Now, love feelings reinforce itself. We saw that earlier, and it is a little bit addictive. Feeling good in a relationship can reinforce by itself. Typically, that maintains the love relationship, but it can also cause problems sometimes when we overdo it. Love paves the way to other human qualities that are good. If you're looking at it in a positive way, it encourages charity, giving, forgiveness, kindness, and all those other good qualities that the basis is that love and caring. And love is motivating and inspiring. If you get loving support from other people, you get inspired, you get motivated to do much more than if you don't have any support from loved ones. Now comes the possessive love. And this is a problem with a lot of youngsters. I see in my practice, and they fall in love and they don't realize that they get attached to them to the point of wanting to control the relationship and control the person they're in love with, and they become possessive. Now, craving for that exclusive rights to one person's love, that's possessive. Love that is conditional on your terms. When you start putting terms and conditions, the other person has to do everything that you want them to do or in your terms. And once you start putting a lot of restrictions and expectations, impositions, the love becomes a possessive one, and sooner or later it starts falling apart. Loving that comes with expectations in return. Again, we like that unconditional love, but again, when you start putting expectations, at some point it becomes possessive. Love that evaporates when you're angry. People can be very loving, but if they have mood swings where they're totally opposite at other times, it's very difficult to know if they're controlling you or if they're really loving you. Loving out of fear and insecurity is also common in especially Indian marriages. People are insecure of the outcome, and therefore they stay in marriages, but they're not in love, or they're not able to interact with each other in loving ways. Show of love only in front of others. This is also very common. Showcase wives or showcase husbands. We have seen that where people kind of show external love, but not really relate to each other. And love that becomes controlling and suffocating. If one of the partners feels controlled and suffocated in that relationship, the other person has become possessive and controlling. Love that becomes an obligation and imposition. A lot of people, are in a relationship that becomes an obligation, and then you have to rethink whether this is real love or possessive love. Now, what we are shooting for is a responsible love relationship. Responsible love is we'll hear how we end up coming to that conclusion. Unconditional love is ideal, but not practical. And all our experienced audience can testify to that. And we know love can be blind and binding. And, a lot of people start thinking in narrow-minded ways, and it distorts their perceptions in favor of the person they love while they're in love, and opposite when they're not in love. Love can be all-consuming, and we have seen that a lot, when people forget all the other responsibilities. And when a single mother sometimes starts dating, she forgets her children, and the children start feeling left out. Love may take you away from responsibility, and we've seen that all the time for teenagers. When they fall in love, their grades drop, and they're having an attitude problem, and they're not responsible anymore because all they think about is their love. Addiction to your love object can be self-destructive. Now, addiction, when I say addiction, love can be addictive, and some people, become exclusively centered on their love object, and that's when they become self-destructive, where they're ignoring themselves and their own, responsibilities, and get behind on their school and lose their job and things like that, and just focus on, being there for their girlfriend or boyfriend. And finally, when that relationship ends, they have nothing to work with. Love alone is not enough, and a lot of people realize that at an early age and start investing in themselves, knowing that it can come and go. One can only love so much. That's the other thing. This can be a bottomless pit when you try to love somebody who's so needy and so demanding, and you can never do enough, and you always feel like you're coming short. It's always your fault that the other person doesn't feel your love. Now, I just put this slide in here just to mention that caregiving is different than caring. We all can care, but when you come to caregiving, there are responsibilities that go with it. And you have to be aware of the needs, you have to be consistent, you have to be responsive to their needs, you have to be able to share their stress and learn to tolerate their disability in your caregiver. You have to have a lot of patience, and you have to also have faith in that person, hope that what you're doing for the person you're taking care of is the right thing to do, and it's a good thing to do, and the person appreciates what you're trying to do. For caregiving requires a lot out of you. Therefore, it's a sacrifice to some extent, but people have to be realistic in what to expect when you're in a caregiving situation. Whereas caring, you can continue to care without having to feel obligated. But still, it's a better way of relating to people in a caring way rather than uncaring ways. Now comes enabling. Now, typically what we say is that we are allowing other people to develop and maintain bad habits. Either they develop bad habits or maintain bad habits because you're allowing them. Now, tolerating bad behaviors, especially with children and sometimes with your spouses, if they're doing things that is really not right, but you don't want to offend them, you don't want them to be upset, you don't want them to be mad, and you don't want them to work against you, and before you kind of tolerate it. But you can do it one time, two times, but when it comes over and it happens over a period of time, you start getting upset and you start mentioning that this is not good. But by the time it may be too late, or they may get used to the idea that you handled it before and you didn't fuss about it before, why are you making a fuss now? Therefore, it becomes a problem because you have allowed it to happen for a period of time and now it's too late to change, or it feels like it's too late to change. Again, putting up with abuse without protest. This happens to a lot of young women who put up with a lot of abuse from their young men who are immature or wild or abusive because they have not been raised right, or they don't have enough self-restraint, or they're full of themselves, and they end up abusing them. But the ladies put up with them many times, especially because they're football players or celebrities, or they feel like they deserve to be, tolerated. But sooner or later, it becomes a problem because these people cannot stop themselves from abusing their wives, and they end up calling the cops and getting rid of their husbands after a few years and after a few kids. So putting up with the abuse in the beginning, it may be out of love, but sooner or later it doesn't work. Now, supporting bad habits to appease them, the husbands or sometimes wives, especially alcohol is a big problem. You don't complain about them because they're not drinking as often, or they're not as bad when they're drinking, and they apologize afterwards. Therefore, you don't think it's a big problem, and therefore you tolerate and you put up with it. Now, when it becomes bad, it becomes very difficult to start confronting them, and it becomes fights and battles and all that. And again, finally, it becomes domestic violence, and finally, we have to kind of break up before they start quitting their alcohol habits and wanting to come back to the marriage. Now, spoiling people with love and make them lazy. This is mostly with the children. A lot of us parents, especially Indian parents, they want to love their kids as long as they can, especially moms. But nowadays, educated moms, they know practice tough love, and they're really good in serving limits. But some old-fashioned moms do spoil with love, and then it's very difficult for them when they become teenagers to kind of get disciplined to work hard and motivate themselves. Instead, they turn against their parents and start looking for somebody else to spoil them and validate that they can do whatever they want. Therefore, you could lose your kids that way if you spoil them too much and then try to straighten them out. Fearful obedience to an abusive spouse. This happens a lot, especially in Indian families, because they're new to the country and they're not used to, being able to fuss about their own problems to other people. So they put up with abuse for a longer period of time and things get bad. But that is also a form of enabling, because it is, they're out of fear, they're basically going along with whatever happens, and until a breaking point comes. Now, allowing yourself to be blackmailed, this is a softer form of enabling, because it's like you would have, they know your weak points, or they know that you're not going to do certain things, and therefore they keep pushing their luck into doing whatever they please, knowing that you're not going to leave them, or you're not going to go that far, and they take the chances, and they have some secrets or something like that that blackmail them, and therefore they continue to be abusive in a relationship, and that's a problem with certain marriages that are dysfunctional. Now, sticking to promises taken out of context. When in the early marriage, a lot of people say a lot of things and make promises without realizing that what they have promised is unrealistic. But at the same time, that becomes a sticking point, and people take advantage of that promise and try to get their way in the relationship long term and exploit the relationships. Now, the diseases or problems that are worsened are caused by these enabling behaviors. The main thing is alcohol and drug problems with spouses and children, that I'm already explaining how the connection is. Abusive behaviors among children and spouses. Now, children abuse parents too, and we see that a lot in impoverished families where there are single mothers who are nice or kind or tolerant or patient with their children, and the children get louder and angrier and meaner and finally start beating up their own mothers. Now, spouses, of course, I described that, how common it becomes because people get stuck with each other for whatever reason, and then abuse continues. Physical and sexual abuse in children tolerated by spouses. This is really sad, but I see that quite often in my practice where children have been abused right in front of their moms, and the moms don't say anything because they're afraid of losing their husband, or afraid of them, the husband beating them up, or killing them sometimes before they tolerate this. And finally, we end up charging even the parents for failure to protect their children from abuse. But it does happen, and it's an enabling behavior for these people who are not strong enough to defend their children. Demanding parents stifling children's lives. Now, adult children. Now, there are some older parents also who are very demanding and abusive, especially some Indian grandparents are very demanding of their daughter-in-laws. It's very, very difficult sometimes. They don't realize that imposition is too strong, too much, and unreasonable. Narcissistic children, these are just spoiled children. And in adult life, they have a hard time keeping relationships because they've been spoiled as kids, and their wives can't, their spouses can't keep them like that. And they keep losing relationships and can't get married because they're too selfish in their relationships. Now, gaming and social media addictions, this is very common in children where parents finally get fed up and don't restrict or don't punish or don't stop these addictions and just finally let them do it, and they have to learn it their own way, and they give up putting restrictions. And those addictions become big problems, sometimes all the way to adult life and the responsibilities. Now, attitude of entitlement and inability to do teamwork. See, people who have gotten their way as their children and never learned teamwork and has been spoiled by their parents, they have a hard time when they're adults in working in teams or working with people, and it limits their ability to do well in their workplace. And some of these people are depressed. They're not happy, even though they've been enabled and they have been the beneficiaries of this favorable treatment from their parents. Their adult life, they're very unhappy because they can't find people who are as good as their mothers who spoil them. And no matter who they find as wives, they're unhappy because they're not getting the same kind of special treatment their mothers gave them. Okay, why are we focusing on this? Why am I talking about this much? See, we are in a culture of individualistic society, and every individual has a period of time where he wants to find out all the things that led up to him or her having the problem. And one of them is to blame their parents for spoiling him or not teaching him right from wrong or not setting him straight when they're young. Therefore, this is a culture of shifting blame, and therefore this enabling has become a common word used by these people that they didn't do this, they enabled me to do it, and this, therefore that's why I'm this way. And it becomes an explanation. There's a quest for unlimited freedom without responsibility. And we've seen that with a lot of young people. They somehow, they didn't have to take care of other people, or didn't have to run households, and they didn't have to share as much responsibility. And when it comes to taking responsibility, they have a hard time. They end up, looking for other people who will take responsibility for them and their weaknesses and their problems, and that becomes a problem. Now, there is some unwillingness on some people's part to set limits in their love relationship because it spoils the feeling of love and that unconditional love and that the honeymoon feeling that they have in their love relationship. They don't want to mess it up. Therefore, they don't want to set limits. But unfortunately, the problem gets worse when you do it that way. There is a need to sanction tough love. You know, we realize that we need to practice tough love to be realistic in a long-term relationship. Therefore, we need to kind of understand this enabling so that we can explain why we need to practice tough love. Now, again, I mentioned sustainable and long-term relationships are only possible if there is not much of enabling happening. It has to be equal responsibilities in the relationships so that you can maintain it long-term and to be sustainable that way. And we, as a society, have high prevalence of diseases of indulgence. Diseases of indulgence can be indirectly traced to enabling behaviors where parents are not willing to invest as much time in setting limits. There are crippling effects of these bad habits as adults. Once you acquire these bad habits, it requires a lot of work to undo the bad habits, and it's a problem. Therefore, we need to understand this, why it happens, so that we can nip it in the bud. Now, why do we do that? You know, it's sometimes obvious, you have to be responsible and we can't spoil people and everybody knows this, and why do we still do it? We want to be good guys and we don't want conflict and confrontation. And, it's always ugly to set limits and start, commotion and arguments and fights. We're afraid that we're pushing them beyond their ability, especially when it comes to parents. Some parents never know if their children are capable of handling that much pressure or not. Therefore, they back off. They expect things, but then they back off. But if they back off too many times, that becomes a problem where the children start expecting their parents to back off and they get stronger and meaner and make more demands. We're taught to love unconditionally. That's nothing wrong with it. And we still want to teach people that true love is unconditional love, and the worthy person, the other person is also able to love unconditionally, then it becomes very nice. We're all vulnerable to be blackmailed in the name of love. And we have seen that online. If you really love me, you'll do this. Therefore, that's very common. Husbands or girls can demand it, and before they can use that. We hope people grow out of bad habits. We don't set limits thinking that when they grow up, they understand and they will naturally realize that they're selfish and they'll quit being selfish. But it doesn't happen that way all the time because habits are habits. We hope somebody else will set them straight. Kids especially, we want, the daddy come home and tell you what to do, or let your grandfather come, and set you straight, or, take you to the pastor, or, somebody else, to, give him a good lesson, or take him to the therapist and saying that he will straighten him out. We're also scared to lose their love and relationship. That is the worst thing. Our mothers, especially Indian mothers, have a difficult time even thought of not, their son not talking, or their children, not staying in touch, or not letting them see the grandchildren. Our kids can blackmail us very easily because they know how much we care about them. Now, we're also scared to lose them to suicide and abandonment. This is a ploy that's used by a lot of addicts. They threaten to kill themselves and they threaten to, excommunicate and all that before parents give in. Okay, now comes the limit setting part. How do we justify putting limits? We can't give somebody something that we don't have. As much as we want to love and give, there's only so much we can give. Their demands outweigh our ability to give them. Therefore, we have no choice but to set some limits. We need to be in a position of strength to lend our hand. You know, if we're in shaky grounds and we're not mentally strong or we don't have the money to give them, how can we pay them for their college tuition or for their new house they want to have, new car they want to have? If we don't have the money, we can't give it to them. We have human limitations on how much we can give. That's that's the truth. You know, we have so many time, how much time, our body can only do so much. We can only help them so much. We can only bail them out so many times. But there is a limit of how much you can give for your kids or for your loved ones, uh, depending on your ability. We cannot sustain loving and giving if we get pain in return. You know, if they only abuse it and if they only make more demands and if they only, you know, get themselves in more trouble by drugs or something like that, it's very hard to sustain that. We don't want to be responsible for supporting bad habits. That, you can see a lot of our friends, making that decision. If we realize that we're supporting something bad and eventually it's not doing what it's supposed to do, we withdraw support. Aiding and abetting criminals is an offense. Recently we had that school shooting and the mother was telling, I hope you don't shoot anybody and I hope we can escape, police won't catch you and things like that. This, in the name of love, she's enabling this kid to be a shooter. Before people don't realize that, but it is an offense and it's not right, and we have to kind of set things straight before things get too bad. We don't want to be used or abused or taken for granted. And I hope we're all kind of aware when we're being taken or when we're being used by anybody and quickly catch ourselves so that we don't continue that process. And we want to promote responsibility and good work ethics. With our children, we want to teach them responsibility. We want to give them good work ethics, and we don't want them just getting a free hand. We want them to work for what we get. I'm sorry. All right. Why do we get used? We practice golden rule, like we treat other people like we want to be treated, and we think everybody is loving just like we are, and therefore we try to do the best we can without realizing that there are some of them who are users and abusers and take advantage of our goodness. We become bound by our promises and our pride, especially parents. I will never, call cops on my child. The wife says, I will never call police on my husband, or something like that. And it's a matter of pride. I will never tell my son is an addict or I don't want to get help because it's a matter of pride that I can handle myself. My issues is my problem, my family problem, and keep it inside the family. We want to be trusted and we want to be reliably available to the people we love. I think I don't blame that, and it's wonderful that you're trustworthy and reliable for your spouse or for your kids. But at the same time, it's your need, and you have to keep on double checking if it is serving their needs or not. Then we don't realize when we're being used and manipulated. This is very common with children manipulating parents and addicts manipulating their friends and loved ones until everybody realizes that this person is manipulating and abusing. We don't want to give up on the people we love. This is a common sentiment. If we really love somebody, we don't give up on them. We always let them come back home. We always give them food and shelter or whatever, basic things. We don't want to withhold basic affection or basic needs. We're too busy to notice who is taking advantage. That's the other thing. A lot of us are very busy and we don't really keep track of how our sons and children are using our money, and we end up realizing later on that we have allowed them to do drugs. And it's hard for some parents. It is hurtful to set limits or saying no. It's always a little bit hurtful, and we wish we didn't have to do that as much. And we tend to delude ourselves and think that these people are trustworthy when they're only using. Now, what do we do? Again, this is where I think we have to educate ourselves and we have to educate other people about this particular tendency and this particular phenomenon that happens to all of us. We need to know our own limitations first, material limitations and emotional limitations, how much we can give emotionally, in terms of time and effort, caring for other people. We have limits as to how much we can give. We don't get anything back in return. Now we have to establish our self-interest and our needs. A lot of us don't even know we have emotional needs. We are too busy giving and taking care of everybody else that we don't take care of ourselves. We have to protect our self-interest, and that's our responsibility. It's like while you're taking your jacket off to other people, if you're going cold, I won't feel sorry for you because you had the jacket, you gave it away. It's very important that we protect ourselves. Manage your primary relationships with care. We all need that primary relationship with our spouses or parents or children or whatever. That's more important than the people who come afterwards, like the friends and neighbors and church and whatnot. We have to broaden our perspectives on how to help other people in a responsible way. We want to help other people, but it has to be in a responsible way, with knowing our limits and knowing what the long-term consequences are. Are we enabling behavior, or encouraging somebody to be living a bad lifestyle? We have to be extra careful on when we're helping others, is it a responsible way or not? We have to re-examine how we allocate our own emotional and material resources. Again, we try to get away from enabling relationships to a give and take relationships. That we try to build relationships with give and take. We have to set boundaries on the relationships that drain you. If you realize something is draining you continuously and you're feeling bad and you don't feel fulfilled, you have nothing good coming out of it, you have to re-examine that and set some boundaries so that you don't get drained. And you have to do first and do no harm. Again, when you're enabling somebody, you might have done some harm to that person. That's the last thing you want to do. And therefore, you have to remember the world will go on without you, and everybody else will survive. The society continues. If not, you're not the only one who's responsible for everything that goes on in your own child's life if you live more than 18. Never get bitter and quit caring about other people. That's the other thing. A lot of people get burnt out and quit caring, and that's really sad. And that happens. I don't want anything to happen like that for any of us. Now, again, child raising without enabling. That's something that I want all of us to be aware of, so that we can continue to tell our friends and their children and whatnot. Responsible parenting is teaching responsibilities, and conditional love is what needs to be practiced with all the children over 2 years of age. According to their capacity, we don't do things that they can do for themselves. Setting expectations and setting conditions for earning their privileges. Every privilege they have should not be taken for granted. They should be able to earn it by proper behaviors. We should tolerate temper tantrums because people have to learn to handle no for answers or negative outcomes, and it's not our responsibility to make the world a better place for them. They have to learn to deal with the world the way it is and learn to handle disappointments. We have to cultivate an attitude of gratitude, and I'm sure everybody agrees. And we have to teach good work ethics and earning trust by working hard. And we have to avoid indulging when they don't deserve it. If they deserve it, of course, give them plenty of praise. Now, this is a little tricky because we're talking about our own spouses. We have to manage the give and take in equal relationships. We consider egalitarian relationships, and we have to make sure there is give and take happening all the time. And if it is an imbalance, we have to correct that balance to make sure that we take care of each other. We have to have a regular session on sharing responsibilities, a regular discussion, and the sharing responsibilities changes with time and place, and over in long-term marriages, we have to revise every so often how we share the responsibilities. We have to communicate clearly when either one of us feel abused or used in our relationship, so that that feeling doesn't stay, and no one of us will enable bad behaviors in others. You have to catch yourself when you have to make too many excuses for him or her. And that means you're enabling something. And you have to re-examine that part. Request changes in behaviors that you're putting up with. If you're putting up with something that is annoying you and you're building up frustration and anger over a period of time, you better talk about it and work on it and have a plan so that you would not build that bad feeling. And even in our marriages, sometimes we had to practice tough love rather than give in. If you give in, nothing changes. But if you practice tough love, something might change in that behavior. Now, after saying all this, I want to say a few words of caution. Loving is not a sin. Never regret natural acts of kindness. You need to be kind. You need to, everything you do in pure love.
ये एप्पल से ना घर में बनाया, बाजार से ला।
एप्पल साइडर में जो फ्रेश जूस होता है इसका ना,
हाँ,
इसको थोड़ा दालचीनी डाल दो,
हाँ,
पानी दूध इसको चूल्हा पर रख के गर्म कर लो। अच्छा टेस्ट है ना?
बहुत बढ़िया। नहीं, मैंने एक बार पिया हुआ, लेकिन इसका टेस्ट कुछ अलग है।
एप्पल साइडर इसमें दालचीनी डाल दो।
नहीं, जो बाजार में भी मिलता है वो, ये अभी घर में बनाया जूस कहाँ से लाया? Fresh juice.
Trying to help and do something is better than doing nothing.
ये है ना जो फ्रेश जूस होता है ना, ये है एप्पल का फ्रेश जूस होता है, बॉटल वाला जो खरीदते हो बाजार से वो है। इसका तो काम के साथ बना दो।
Pramod ji, can you confirm who it is? Okay. When in doubt, we should help. That's the other thing that I believe, that doing something is better than not doing, and helping is in general a good thing.
नहीं, वो ज्यादा पुराना हो जाएगा तो it will become alcoholic.
अभी एक हफ्ता से पड़ा हुआ है ना?
नहीं, ये तो इसका फ्रेश है। हाँ,
नहीं, ये हम लोग के घर में है ना, थैंक्स गिविंग के समय हम लोग को बोले थे, हम बोले ये लाके पिला, एप्पल साइडर पीते हैं।
Okay. Fear of enabling should not make us hold back on doing good. That's all. Want us to
नहीं, all जगह कहीं से भी ले लो, कहीं से भी ले लो, but that should be जो लिखा हुआ है ना,
डेट उसके देखना पड़ेगा।
हेलो,
can you just
बाजार में बेचेगा ना तो एक्सपायर हो जाएगा तो नहीं रखेगा ना।
can you hold on
100% apple cider, fresh crisp apples.
please
खींच लिया।
please identify hello please identify yourself when you ask, and let's wait for
apple processed from 100% apple cider.
Host can mute.
Dr. Vasudev,
Nature's nectar.
I think you can disconnect that person. Dr. Vasudev,
And this came
is
from
an
all
option for you to disconnect.
okay.
Yeah, click on that and there should be an option to disconnect.
I may have to just mute everybody. Let's just let Vedvyas finish his presentation.
Yeah, one more.
Then we all.
Okay. We should continue to act in good faith, and I do believe. Okay, that was my last slide anyway. We can go on to the question and answer session.
Just let me say one thing. Those who want to ask questions, please identify yourself.
चलो करो। ठीक है, ठीक करो।
Please identify yourself, and if you can show your video and then ask the question, please. Who was the person who was asking these questions and making comments?
No, I felt like it was a disruption and it was a conversation out of context, I thought.
Those who want to ask questions, please unmute yourself and identify yourself and then ask the question, please.
Yeah. Go ahead, Umaji. Unmute yourself.
No, it's a simple question. I think I probably know the answer. Is our awareness more, because these are forever, these instances and this enabling, all this has been going on. Has it increased in the modern situations because of lack of time and two people being very busy working with one and working outside the home, then raising children and taking care of all the responsibilities. Do you feel that it is on the increase or our awareness is more?
No, it's awareness that's increasing first. But as we increase our awareness, we're also seeing the consequences of a lack of parental attention. And where out of convenience, we allow children to do things. And then we realize that maybe they have too much freedom. Therefore, a lot of these mothers who allow their husbands to abuse their kids because they don't know their husbands are doing that. They're working and it's their new husbands, and they happen behind their back, and they don't know what to do because they can't. So a lot of these things are also happening in more situations as the society becomes so individualistic, or everybody's taken away to work, and there's not enough time in between to be accountable to each other in a responsible way.
Also, the availability of the social media for the younger children. And I think that has something to do with it. But we have to grow with the community. We have to grow with the times. So it's always a conflict between, because I know 10-year-olds who throw a tantrum. I mean, these are others children, however, I don't have such young ones. But if they don't get iPad, it's like constantly nagging the parents, so they get vexed up and then just giving. So none of us knows what is right or wrong. It's given the family situation.
The child psychiatrists, we don't like social media as much because it is taking them away from their parents, and they get attached to the people in the media, and they get misled because a lot of them are young and impressionable people, and the people on the other side are many times predators. It's very dangerous, and therefore we cannot help but advise caution. But at the same time, we realize that they are filling a void, and a lot of our children miss out on social time, especially during the COVID times. And it is nice that they can keep in touch with people. I have seen a lot of people, thrive and survive, and some Indian kids have been very innovative in learning and advancing their education. And there are so many good things. Before I can't say all bad, but it's a dangerous intervention if it's not supervised.
Any other questions? Venkat, go ahead.
Yeah. Is this any difference between the Western culture and our Indian culture, or is it the same across, or is it more among spouses or children, or how is that? How do you describe those?
It's definitely more in culture, but it's more subtle because it's culturally expected. Not in India, our wives put up with more things than with their husbands than any American wives. There's no question about it. And our mothers also tolerate so much more from their children than American mothers. Therefore, is it enabling or is it cultural? It's a debatable question. But at the same time, they do it in a loving way, and therefore it creates loving bonds. And therefore, I'm not totally against it as long as it's done in a loving, responsible way. They're not necessarily enabling. They're setting expectations that are good for them. Therefore, it's wonderful that we have this cultural advantage that our children are turning out good most of the time.
Any other questions?
I want to ask something.
Yes.
I'm glad when I saw the topic, I thought it was very timely, considering I know Vedvyas mentioned the recent.
Excuse me, can you identify yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Shobha Bhatt from Huntsville, Alabama.
Okay.
Thank you. So the recent shooting and how the parents enabled the child to do that without realizing probably the consequences is an example of it. And see, I'm an old school parent. So we were given the role of being a parent in the olden days where we had no instructions, no preparation for the role. So we adapted with the times. And considering we came to this country, we had to walk a fine line between being the old-fashioned parents and adapt to the role that we are supposed to play in this country. So there is a slippery road between the unconditional love and enabling. So it gets a little tricky sometimes because we are told we have to show unconditional love. So there has to be a line we have to draw at some point, which I feel like we don't have the tools. Like not everybody is able to attend sessions like this and educate themselves. So it is very easy to fall into that role of being an enabler, I feel.
Nice thing is Indian parents, they expect unconditional love from the children back. And a lot of our children have that same guilt that they should show unconditional love and respect for their parents. But unfortunately, the transplants, the kids who were raised here and the parents from there, the kids, the Americanized kids, they don't feel that responsibility towards their parents back. For then, what are we going to do? We blame ourselves for enabling them because we didn't realize that they're American kids.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Any other questions here? If not, give him, that was an excellent presentation. Give him a good hand there. Wait, that was an excellent job. And this presentation has been recorded on the cloud. If you or your friends or family wants a recording, please send me an email and I'll be glad to send the recording. Recordings actually come out much easier, much better, and it's very clear. So again, thanks, Ray, and I hope you all have a good evening and a good weekend, and get ready for the
topics coming up in the future too. Please check our email and make sure that we take advantage of any interesting topics and participate, please. We want questions so that we know this is an active issue.
And of course, if you have any suggestions as far as the topics, what we are doing now, instead of having 2 sessions on the same day, we are giving enough time for 1 session every month. So we are alternating 1 month with mental health topic. The second month is general healthcare topics. And if you know of any good speaker and any good topics, please let us know, and we can get them and do the presentation. The next topic is actually going to be in January, 1st of January, which is the Saturday in January. Is that a good time first to have it, or you want to wait for the following Saturday? What do you say, Vail? I mean, 1st of January should be okay, no? Unless a lot of people are going for New Year's Eve parties and staying awake till 2 or 3 in the morning. Anyway, we'll think about it, and but let us know if you come across any interesting topics or speaker. Again, thanks again, and I'll kind of go ahead and end this session, and hope you have a good night. See you.
Please come back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vedvyas. Excellent.
That was very
Excellent.